Welcome to episode 58 of Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling. Oh, it is good to be back, folks. I've kind of had a bit of a long couple of months since the last episode of Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling, and I guess I should probably explain it if the information thing at the bottom of this video or any of the tweets or posts that I've made has covered. In March, or more specifically mid-March, I got hit by a bout of influenza. Now, it wasn't really particularly serious, but I did have I did have 3 consecutive weeks where I was basically having a coughing fit. So obviously, that is not something that you want to be doing while you are doing podcasting, of course. So I took a break, and then I decided to include April into the mix there. Because usually April is the opening of spring allergy season for me, and I tend to have more issues there because of my allergy issues. So I took a break from April, and a day before I have to go to a wrestling show because I got tickets for it, I'm here to talk about a spring reflection of wrestling in Falconer, New York. Yes, folks, I'm covering my local independent wrestling promotion once again. The one that I go to, Southern Tier Wrestling. I've covered Southern Tier Wrestling quite a bit on this show, and they are a promotion that is based in Jamestown, New York, my home city. And for the past, since 2016, they have been running wrestling shows on a regular basis in my area. So naturally, to see the fine arts and entertainment of these gladiatorially great wrestlers, I go here to these shows to see the best regional wrestling and state wrestling and international competitors when they come down here in the area. And really, it's not a typo. This area has, over the last few years, developed into a really solid promotion. As I've covered in the past here on Wacky World. In fact, I covered the first Fast Times event, which, ironically enough, that one also ended up delayed. So this show is Fast Times at Faulkner High Part 2. I covered the first part in an earlier video. That would be A Dangerous Quiet Before the Storm, for those of you who are looking to go on an archive binge of sorts. And, well, I guess I should get to it then. Now, this show was held on April 6, 2019, from the Faulkner Central High School in Faulkner, New York. Faulkner, New York is a very interesting little town. It's right next to Jamestown, and it's a nice little quaint city. The downtown district is nice and beautiful. The area itself has got all sorts of nice swamp features and wooded areas and parks. When the downtown district is not being terrorized by arsonists, because that was a serious problem I had a couple of years ago when somebody decided to burn part of the downtown district. It was national news headlines. But the city has since recovered. They've demolished the burnt out buildings. And they have tried to recover the best they can from the situation that happened beforehand. And one of the ways that they've been able to heal, and one of the ways that they've been able to have some fun after dealing with massive tragedy and people burning buildings, is through professional wrestling. Professional wrestling is something that I often view as can be used to heal. It can be used to enrich and enlighten those who may not necessarily realize that, hey, this is art. I know that everybody has this long-standing national debate about whether wrestling is art or sport or this or that. To me, it is a bit of both. It's a sport in that there is a very real risk of injury for these competitors in the sacred ring. It's art because you get to, do a gimmick. You get to be another person. You get to be a character that either you want to be in real life, or you get to be this other character that you can't be in real life, but you can at least play him in a wrestling ring. And overall, this show had, I believe, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 matches on this show. Now, when you're thinking of an independent wrestling show, 9 matches, that's actually a very good value for money. How much was the general admission tickets? $10. $3 increase on show day. Okay, that's considerably less than a WWE show, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so is there a catch? Oh. In fact, actually, I would argue that basically the SDW independent wrestling shows in the area here in Western New York, especially since they have a school up in Buffalo called Grappus Anonymous, um, the quality of the wrestling is about on the level that you would normally see on a WWE TV program, if not a little higher in some regards, because of the fact that many grapplers in the area prefer to do a lot of technical wrestling. And you also get your high flying, you also get your dives, you also get everything. It's a variety of goodness. And these 9 matches really do showcase the variety and the free-dimensionalness of the performers that perform locally in the area. A couple of notes before we begin. I do know many of these wrestlers. I've talked to many of them, and I know I'm friends with some of them on Twitter. But besides that, it's not really going to affect my views of how I view each of the matches. The matches themselves, mostly for the most part, were solid to great. And they did their jobs exactly as advertised, basically. There were some surprises. There were definitely some people that really stood out to me as a first-time viewer of their work. And that's going to show through in this particular show because these local shows are a little bit more gushing than usual Wacky Worlds because I know this area. I know Western New York. It's in the middle of the Rust Belt. We're depressed enough already as is. I prefer to believe in more being positive in these situations when something is done right. And this promotion and these wrestlers and this arena, it did all of those things. During a crowded and busy WrestleMania weekend, this was the only show that I watched during that entirety of that week. I didn't watch any of the other sub indie shows from WrestleMania because I don't have access to most of the streaming platforms on which they're host, and the WWE events just weren't very interesting to me. NXT TakeOver has been basically dominated by the rise of Johnny Evil, who is basically a cruiserweight version of Triple H in my mind, and WrestleMania 35 is, gosh, Lee, 8 hours long? 8 hours for a wrestling show? It's basically 2 shows in one. I mean, I know it's the grandest stage and all that sort of stuff, but for less than 3 hours, I can go to a local independent wrestling show, watch 9 matches of equal and or better quality in some cases, and there you go. I'm not saying that the indies are superior to WWE or anything. Heck no. If you've heard this show in the past, I've actually been harsher on the independent scene than I am on Vince and Mordor and Isengard and company. That's because of the fact that indies often brag and boast, oftentimes a little bit too much in some cases, that they are the pinnacle, that they are the best, that they are showcasing a lot of arrogance, and that the pride is certainly going to come before fall in many cases. Hint, hint, the Midwest. Hint, hint, California. Hint, hint, every other territory. Basically, New York has done the exact opposite. They're a territory that has been in rebuild mode for 4 years now, and it is really starting to showcase with this first match. The Moonlight Sun, Mike Skyros versus Megabyte Ronnie. Okay. So let's start off with the introduction of the show. It's in a schoolhouse. It's in a very reasonably sized venue and can hold about 500 people. I think that there were about 300, 350 people in attendance, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less. I wasn't really sure because I didn't do too much of a head count, but I did notice that some of the sections were definitely really full. It was a reasonably well-attended independent wrestling card. I think that other people were going off to the Ice Arena show to see the Jamestown Rebels compete, so there may have been some overlap in the scheduling there. But it was a solidly attended show. It was in a venue that, for one, I talked about this on the last time I did Fast Times at Faulkner High, but the last time, this show was plagued with some issues with black ice in the parking lot, and the fact is that it was very stormy outside that day. This show, it was not stormy, and it was in fact relatively nice outside, despite it being very cold. And we went into the venue. I got my tickets a couple days beforehand at one of the ticket hosting locations. And we went into the building. And as always, I take my folks to pro wrestling shows. No, they don't take me to pro wrestling shows. I take them to pro wrestling shows. It's a fun artistic experience for my mother, who really enjoys going to these shows. And I often talk about it with people. It's like, well, we both really enjoy going to these things, and it's really a fun experience for both of us. And every time I go to one of these shows, I feel really relaxed and very comfortable. And that's sort of an odd thing for me because I don't usually do very well in most of these events from a perspective of crowd. But wrestling events, I like the crowd to be rowdy. I like the crowd to be cheering or booing people. And beforehand, it was kind of a smarky crowd that kind of did a lot of chanting, or, the random indie chants that you often hear a lot of other independent wrestling shows. But here, that kind of has changed over the last couple of years. You either get a reaction of a lot of cheers, a lot of boos, and occasionally somebody in the crowd trying to smack talk one of the wrestlers who's probably heard every single song and dance routine that's being said at this point. But the most important thing when you're doing an independent wrestling show is that you have to have an opening match that really sets the world on fire. And since it had been 7 months since the last STW show, which was Bergman Brawl, the second edition in 2018, they had been on a 7-month layoff. Now, the wrestlers themselves have been competing upstate New York, up at ESW in Buffalo, the Rochester promotions, the other promotions up in the central regions of New York, up in Canada, and a lot of changes had happened. I mean, I've not mentioned this before, but 4 wrestlers from Buffalo got in a car accident on the way home from a show in Montreal, and that really highlights one of the things I've often said on these broadcasts, which is I like the fact that there are close by local promotions within about 100 miles, 150 miles of Buffalo, because you don't have to drive so far to get to a wrestling show, especially not in the middle of dead winter trying to drive on the interstate where there's a lot of black ice. So, Mike Skyros and, of course, Captain Ham, the devourer of all hot dogs, corn dogs, chicken fingers, chicken wings, and at least 1 or 2 cotton candy machines. No, not the machine itself, not just the cotton candy. A professional eater from New York, Megabyte Ronnie, who competed at the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest last year, by the way. He also competed in that event several years beforehand. And he's now trying to qualify once again by going to various different outlets. And I would assume consuming the entire arena to prove that he belongs amongst the top 20 or so, 20, 30 competitive eaters in the country. I assume it's like Game of Thrones, but with hot dogs and mustard into the eyes. Anyway, Ronnie has gone on a tear in STW and has defeated opponents via his classical underhanded means. So he is the heel here. Mike Skyros has had a very solid last year in STW. A wrestler who is basically a hybrid between a power wrestler and a cruiserweight. This guy can deadlift Terrell Kenneth, and Terrell Kenneth, last I checked, is not small. So, it was one of the highlight matches that we got to see Skyros in last time was at the Fight Night Volume 1 show where he faced and deadlifted Terrell. That was still spectacular and still something that those two actually talk about frequently on the social medias. So this match really set the right mood in mind for this particular show because it was a show of changes and a show of showcasing improvement. One of the things that Ronnie has definitely been working on has been his grappling. He's got the character down pat. Obnoxious large ham who is better than you is basically as a very good character archetype to have as a professional wrestler. He's big, he's loud, and he's going to crush crush his opponents into mini corn dogs. And that's, well, what he was dealing with Skyros. I mean, he even tried to pin the guy down by attacking him with a people's elbow drop while Skyros was pinned by a hot dog. I mean, seriously, just the level of character detail of him being the obnoxious competitive eater from Coney Island. He's actually was billed from Coney Island in this particular case, as I can remember. And just like the auditory visuals in this particular match were highlighted by just the children booed Ronnie, they cheered Mike, and it just was a match that really set the right tempo. I mean, Skyros got to do his high flying offense along with showcasing his power moves. If you want a utility wrestler who is good at doing both power and technique and flying, put Mike Skyros on a show. You will be incredibly impressed with the results. And the same goes for Ronnie. Ronnie had the longest sustained boos in STW history thus far. I would probably have to check with the historians and auditors about that. But at the Fairground show last year, he got 1 minute of consecutive booing after his underhanded victory against the Buffalo Bad Boy Brian Jennings. It was a match. This match was a match that showcased Ronnie's massive improvement as a grappler. He showcased his technical ability, showcased his holds, where I project this guy basically as what would happen if you combined a North Carolinian grappler, because he's originally from North Carolina, with Timothy Thatcher. Yes, I see Ronnie's upside that high as a guy that could be comparable to Timothy Thatcher, a great grappler who also can showcase a lot of personality because of his experience of being on those competitive eating chore shows, which is basically like a pro wrestling event, except the vegan wrestlers would probably scream and run out of the building. Or wrestlers who are on a cheat day. So this was a fantastic match and a great way to start off the show. And then we had one of the most fantastic comedy matches that I've ever seen that actually caused my mother to accidentally bite her tongue because she was laughing so hard. Finn to win, Vinny Moon and the Mako, who I should remind folks is a masked wrestler who is basically a shark. Vinny Moon is a 1980s style wrestler who is a guy who basically is a celestial body. He lives on the moon. Gravity hates him. Yes, the forces of gravity was one of his major feuds last year. They take on Steve Gage and Mikey Every Night, currently not representing the patron saints of professional wrestling, as you might have recalled from past shows. No, they were going out on their own and dressed as crazed Floridian fishermen from the looks of it. They were dressed out in tropical fisherman's gear in order to try and take the STW Tag Team Championships away from Finn to win. Vinny Moon, in this particular instance, was basically a fish handler at this point. He was trying to control the devastating beast known as the Mako, who literally thinks of himself as a shark. Unfortunately for his shark compatriot, Every Night and Gage had planned for this eventuality, first by dressing up as the natural enemies of the shark, a deranged, psychotic, Floridian vacationing fisherman, which was, of course, well received. So, embracing their inner Florida beach bum, they have thought of a way to defeat this devastating fish. They decided to put out some bait on a line. Yes, fishing pole with bait in the middle of the ring, starting of the opening match. Mako is in the ring. Vinny cannot tag him out. Mako subserves to his shark instincts and takes the bait. And then he is promptly caught by a fishing net. The level of physical detail going into the physical comedy of this match, because I'm going to talk about something here, folks. Comedy matches are actually, I feel, one of the most difficult types of matches to pull off in professional wrestling. Why? You never know how the crowd is going to react. Either they're going to react to your routine and they're going to absolutely love it, or they're just going to go, "We want serious wrestling. Where's the serious grappling?" If you know what crowd you're performing this in, and this is why I really encourage wrestlers to work a lot of family shows. because you need to be able to add those dimensions to your game plan where you're able to say, hey, okay, this is the character that I do when I'm at an 18 plus show. This is the character that I do when I'm at a family show. There's some big subtle differences. Cutting back on the swearing, not doing anything profane, not doing anything too particularly inappropriate. You know, physical comedy basically in the style of Charlie Chaplin and the Three Stooges. That's great for a family show. It fits that joyful carnival spirit that a lot of these independent wrestling shows try to capture without the, well, treating everybody as a mark sort of thing, as the ancient carnies used to do. Because wrestling has in many ways moved past that in this situation. Your wrestling is now an honest craft. It is an honest profession. It is an honest craft. It's not something that's, it's not something that's being done in a dark alley, although a lot of seedy independent promotions sometimes still think that they're in that. But this match was one of the most fantastic comedy matches that I've ever witnessed. It was such a fun match. And then what happened is after they got the comedy out of the way, which caused everybody to howl and laugh, after the Mako broke free from his shark net containment, thanks to Vinny, they then had a really good wrestling match. Every night and Gage got to showcase more of their grappling ability in this particular instance. And Steve Gage has, as I've said before in the past, this guy has a lot of potential that I'm not sure at this point is really being realized. He's a guy that can do wonderful things in the undercard. His wrestling skills are good. He's getting better all the time. Same goes for every night. He's gotten a lot of confidence from the fact that he's one of the trainers at Graps Anonymous. And that ability to be able to help people have the things that he wasn't able to have when he started out. Because they didn't have the training facilities or infrastructure that in Buffalo Wrestling back in the early 2000s like they do now. And it really shows in this particular match. I mean, Vinny is a guy that wrestles at Graps to improve. And his improvement over the last several years has been wonderful to see. Mako, great comedy wrestler. Fantastic. He understands his character. He understands that he is Shark, therefore he attacks people. And the comedy worked. The match worked. It was such a fun match. It felt fun. I was like, this is such a fun match. Was so enjoyable, which makes the contrast going into the next match on this card so nice because it's a show of contrast. You had your opening match sprint that was a very well constructed match between Skyros and Ronnie, and then you have your fantastic comedy match, and then you have the third match on the card. Out first was Gavin Glass, a guy who has been on several SDW shows in the past. Gavin is a guy that is a cruiserweight wrestler, and he showcases a lot of very good high flying, is very good in other cruiserweight matches. And then the building starts to shake. Why was the building shaking, Fizz, you might ask? Oh, the earthquake seismometers were going off because of the fact that the sound of boos were literally shaking the building off of its foundation to a certain extent because of the arrival of one man. Or one beast, or I should say. Super Beast appeared. His adoring audience started booing the literal heck out of him as he began to shout and bellow. His champion, the Dawn, Rob Sweet, was not here because Beast decided in an intelligent play to sit his champion before he did something reckless. You see, they have reason to think in this situation that since the Dawn Rob Sweet has a rematch clause, that they can basically keep a hold of that. Beast is being intelligent here by keeping several cards in hand to try and dethrone the current STW heavyweight champion, Big Time Bill Collier, who dethroned his champion Rob Sweet at the Berkman Brawl show. And he's got some help. So, originally it was thought that Beast was going to be facing Gavin Glass, but Beast bought a new suit, and he doesn't want to ruin that new suit. He instead is going to be that proud uncle who introduced his boys to a victim. Poor unfortunate victim in Gavin's case. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the Nachi Mafia, the newest additions to the STW roster. These two colossal behemoths. They like the fine arts, they like poetry, they like fine Italian cuisine, and they are almost certainly going to turn Gavin Glass into a fine risotto topping for pasta sauce. Because the Nachi Mafia absolutely destroys him in a 2-on-1 handicap match. This was one of the most impressive displays of a debut that I've seen on one of these shows. And this is not any sort of like overhyping or anything like that. I was legitimately stunned. And so was the Nachi Mafia. These are guys who had been wrestling on smaller shows in central and upstate New York for the better part of a year, getting themselves seasoned, getting themselves ready for a promotion like STW. Guys, did any of you tell them that the crowd has a tendency to react very well to traditional acts of diabolical villainy? In this case, literally steamrolling Gavin Glass, who did a phenomenal job in selling the presence of being destroyed by these two ginormous, intelligent behemoths. While Super Beast looks on at ringside, looking like a proud father or uncle as his kids absolutely destroy their opponent. So much so that after they win, they decide to try and destroy him some more, only for Gavin Glass to be saved by big-time Bill Collier. This was a phenomenal debut that set a really nice tempo for presumably the rest of upcoming season in SDW wrestling. Beast now has some hired hands, some destroyers to go along with his family. The landlord, the Don Rupp suite, and now the bruising muscle of the Nachi Mafia. And this is not going to be the first time that we will be talking about the Nachi Mafia on this show. As Bill Collier forces them out of the ring, he gets Gavin up to his feet and congratulates him on literally surviving being run over by two steamrollers. So then he calls out Vince Valor, who is his scheduled opponent for tonight. He calls him out. He says to him that he and Vince have had wars before, but he also says that he is going to destroy Vince and he's basically going to retain his championship. Vince thinks that he can beat him. They have a standard face versus face promo that basically showcases who's going to be the best wrestler here without it being too arrogant or showcasing one alignment side or the other. The story of Vince Valor and SDW this year is going to be relatively interesting to hear about because Vince Valor is the utility guy. He's a guy that you can put into any match on the card and he will succeed phenomenally in not just making himself look good, but also doing wonders with his opponent. He's a guy that can do power moves. He's a guy that can do technical wrestling. He had an absolutely phenomenal match against Brandon Thurston at the Fight Night Volume 1 card when they had to deal with the fact that the roof was very small, so they couldn't do excessive high flying. So the technical wrestlers start grinning smiles and saying, "We have a match that we can do technical wrestling in." And then it ends with Bill revealing that Vince is his cousin by marriage because which caused a lot of laughs in the crowd. The Thanksgiving family dinner, I would assume, is going to be very awkward at the end of the year because these two had another match up in, I think, Canada, which I think was more of a traditional face versus heel dynamic. So after that nice promo, which calmed things down for a little bit, then we get our next match. Unstoppable James Segeda takes on, well, the aforementioned patron saint of professional wrestling, Brandon Thurston. If I wasn't just blown away by the handicap match that I saw, this is the match that also literally blew the doors, the entire roof, and the walls of the building completely off. This was a match that was technical, it was hard-hitting, it was a 1980s early 90s All Japan Pro Wrestling style, strong style match. When you can literally hear them trying to kick each other's shins off, you know that they are doing a phenomenal job as people are gazed in awe as these two go at it. And there's a reason as to why they're going at it. James Segeda is a tag team specialist. He's a guy that was teamed with Vince Valor in the Unstoppable Tag Team up in ESW, where they are the current ESW Tag Team Champions. Brandon Thurston is the current ESW Heavyweight Champion. There's also another reason. Brandon has been on, well, national internet TV recently. Because after this match occurred, he then faced Jay Freddy at Uncharted Territory Episode 4 for Beyond Wrestling. So, the guy that does a lot of wrestling, who does wrestling as well as also trains the folks, he trains people at Grappling Anonymous. And he also does an economics podcast called WrestleNomics, which he has been doing solo since Chris Harrington got signed, much like the kitchen sink and grandma to AEW. So he's been doing it solo, and he just did a recent episode covering the Q1 that WWE had, the $8.4 million loss that they had, the amount of panic in the boardroom and the shareholders room because they overestimated on their estimates, it looks like. Oh boy. Well, that's going to be another episode for another time, but this match was amazing. This was the kind of match that my mother used to watch in the 1970s 1960s and 70s, when she would go down to the Erie Arena with her father when he was covering the boxing and wrestling events for the local paper. And this was just reminded her of those matches, and it was like, wow. It was both traditional and it was also modern, and they went at it. It was like, wow, I get to see this, and I don't have to drive 394 miles to attend a WrestleMania weekend show, and I get to see some fantastic wrestling. Well, that's certainly worth your money's worth. Right there, you know. It was a show of an improvement from James, who has been consistently good and has been improving over time. This tag team championship run that he's been having with Vince Valor has clearly showcased a lot of improvement. And Brandon Thurston, he's going to be your sleeper guy for 2019 wrestler. He's going to be a 2019 wrestler standout. You know how certain guys and gals, they have runs where they suddenly get really, really noticed by the general wrestling public? I think Brandon did that with his match with Jay Freddy, but he also did it with this match versus James Segeda. It was the kind of match that really showcases the drive and determination, because Brandon legitimately wants to make pro wrestling better. And he's doing it in a way that is the most practical. Train people, make them better, see what their strengths are, exemplify their strengths, try to, deal with the weaknesses and try to make them strengths, or to, make them less prominent. And this match did it all. They worked a fast pace, they worked a traditional grappling style, but they also incorporated, like I said, a large amount of All Japan style. When he starts busting out the Toshiaki Kariwara kicks, I'm like, oh, he's getting serious about this, isn't he? Also, I didn't expect Thurston was going to be on this card. I thought he was going to be over in New York, New Jersey for WrestleMania weekend. We both did, and instead we hear the Patron Saint song coming up, and like, oh, Thurston's on this card. Cool. Because he wasn't on the card in September because he had to go to All In Weekend in Chicago. And another guy who wasn't on the card in September was Terrell Kenneth, who's in the next match. The destroyer of everything, Terrell Kenneth, faces off against the adventurer, Stone Rockwell. Yes, Stone Rockwell, also known in some territories as Asylum, I basically assume that the Rockwell character is basically he found a bunch of old adventures magazines from the 20s to the 50s, basically assumed the persona as a traveling adventurer because he didn't want to be put in the asylum again. Well, after his 1098th escape attempt, which has succeeded, and he is now a globe-trotting adventurer, complete with Indiana Jones-esque theme music, a hat that cannot be removed from the turnbuckle because it will probably cause a rock slide, and other accoutrements of an adventurer. This was a hard-hitting, hostile fight. You heard about hoss fights? This is basically that kind of match. Both of these wrestlers are very capable of inflicting large amounts of pain and seismic shockwaves with each of their rhino charges. This was a match that was a different style of match from the matches that had been previously. While the match beforehand was a strong style affair, it was also highly involved with technical wrestling, holds, grapples, and people trying to remove each other's fingers. This match was not that. In fact, it was one of the few matches I've seen that has actually ended in disqualification, as Terrell Kenneth didn't respond to a 5 count and ended up getting disqualified. This was a fun match. A really, really fun match. Now, I'm trying to remember, but I think the Frankie Fevers promo was either between this match or the match before it. But to continue, Rockwell apparently has summoned a demonic spirit, however, and he'll be facing Warchild at STW Goldrush. For Kenneth, well, let's just say that our Shakespearean destroyer of everything has bigger sights in his grand scheme as he talks to the disembodied skull that has championship rings around it. He's also going to be on later on in the show, for those of you who might not be aware. Yes. Okay. So actually, it was okay. Yeah, it was after Rockwell versus Kenneth. So Frankie Fevers comes out to the ring to cut a promo. He was either before First and Surrega or after Rockwell Kenneth. I can't really remember exactly, but he comes out to cut a promo on his former friends, the Divine Alliance. Because in this very building, at Faust Times at Falconer High, actually, was it this one or was it another one? Anyway, they turned on Fevers. And Fevers has been seeking revenge on the various members of the Divine Alliance ever since. He destroyed Caesar in a disqualification match at Fight Night. And then the feud stumbled for a couple of months because of injuries. Fevers had injured his knee, and scheduling conflicts with the other Divine Alliance led to the match being postponed. This is the second part of the match, which basically gives you a reintroduction of this feud, and it also injects a bottle of nitrous oxide into it because there's another person involved in this feud now. The one-off appearance of the Patriot. Yes, the Patriot. No, not the Del Wilkins version. This is Tom Brandy's version of the Patriot, also known as Patriot 2 in some places. And the Divine Alliance comes out, mocks Frankie, and then proceeds to say that the Patriot had skipped town. He didn't. In fact, he wants to basically crush those little whippersnappers into a tin of sardines to sold with an American flag on top. Basically. So now, the Caesar and Johnny Puma now have to face off against Fevers and the Patriot in a tag team match with their manager, the diabolical, despicable Don Kennedy, who has adapted an American rocker look that makes him distinctly look like Dolph Ziggler for some reason. So, this match was set up later on in the show and also produced a wonderful highlight. Frankie decided to swear on the show by calling them the B word. In which my mother, without a single step or skip or beat, shouts out the words, "Family show!" to the wrestlers and the attendees. To which every single person suddenly turns around and looks at her. This is the same person who, a little funny story here. She had to go to a conference in the 70s when she was working at Radio Shack, and which is known as Tandy Computers back then. And she was at a bullfighting event. And when a bull escaped from a little calf, escaped from one of the cowboys and knocked it down, she literally screamed, "Yay, cow." That's just an example right there of my mom, who is just so wonderful. And I look over and I'm like, okay, this is another one of those yay cow moments, isn't it? So after the promo, the next favorite part of going to one of these local wrestling shows is the intermission period. And it was a fun experience because intermission, you get to thank the wrestlers for their matches, the ones who are out there. And this is a traditional wrestling promotion, so usually the heels stay back a ways, and the faces or the guys that are about to compete in their matches stay at the merchandise tables. One of the great things about the shows is that getting to people watch, getting to see all the wrestlers shuffle back and forth, showcasing their merchandise and wares to sell to people. They had in one section, there was a general merchandise section, and apparently they were selling luchador masks for $10. So I was like, have I suddenly stumbled into an Arena Mexico show? Was my reaction, because like there were all sorts of kids and parents wearing luchador masks. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. It was a really kind of cool visual, like really showed the, the character of this promotion. It's a fun traditional wrestling promotion that has a traditional face heel dynamic, but it does incorporate a lot of modern elements, So go down. I get a shirt from Mike Skyros, the Moonlight Sun owl shirt, which he now has available in black, as a black t-shirt design. The one I got was white. And I also picked up a shirt from a guy that I'm going to be talking about in the next match. Another high-flying wrestler, Dakota Orion. I thank them for their matches, for the matches of people that have performed, and walking around the arena, talking to wrestlers, talking to fans, talking to people who are, excited to be there, just the general excitement of, oh, this is a wrestling show. It's a nice wrestling show. During WrestleMania week, I didn't have to go 394 miles, as I said, to go to New York, New Jersey, and spend oodles upon oodles of money just to travel around. It would have cost me we estimated it would cost about $120 to about $200 to attend WrestleMania weekend, and that would be on the cheap end. Be 300 plus. $10 general admission ticket, 2 t-shirts, $20 each. Doesn't that sound like a much better alternative to an extent, especially for those who don't have a lot of disposable income, like lower income, mid income families who are trying to save every penny because of how uncertain things are right now? I mean, if you're looking to get into a local show, I mean, a one-off experience, an $80 WWE show in general admission, okay, you can do that. You can do a $50 show at one of the second-tier indies, and then there are the local indies, which provide a cheaper experience, but also at the same time, it varies highly on which indies, some indies have talent that are not as high up level. Some guys have wrestlers that aren't trained properly. This is a territory where wrestlers are trained properly and professionally, and the wrestlers that are booked from outside of the Buffalo, New York area are very good professional wrestlers from Canada, from Pennsylvania, from Ohio, from New York, from the eastern half of New York, New Jersey. And then you have also special appearances by various different legend wrestlers like the Patriot. So very good value for money. And the next match after that was also a showcase of that. Dakota Orion versus Ryan Cassidy. Ryan Cassidy has feuded with the elderly for the past year. Every single legend wrestler has gone up against the might of Ryan Cassidy, man who yells his name out like a Pokemon. Dakota Orion is not a legends wrestler, but he could become one. Dakota is a high-flying flip wrestler who is got a lot of very good technical skills hidden underneath the wow, he just did a 450 dive. Wow, he just did that drop kick. Every time that I take photos of Dakota's matches with my camera, it's like, how did he get up in the air like that? Is my reaction. How did he do that? It's always fun to watch Dakota's matches, and it's always fun to see what Cassidy is going to do in this situation, because Cassidy turned heel in 2018 and is now basically become the most irritating, annoying wrestler in a good way on these shows. Every wrestler really does try to differentiate themselves from the other. While some of them do the traditional tricks of the trade when it comes to either being a face or a heel, they try to differentiate themselves and become three-dimensional characters. In Cassidy's case, he basically is the guy who is technically smart. He was a fantastic base for Orion because they did a match that was very close to a Lucha Libre style match. Fitting, given the fact that the crowd was basically surrounded by luchador masks, and I felt as though that felt like I was in Arena Mexico or a Puebla Arena. But this match showcased yet another different side: fantastic cruiserweight wrestling. I really can't watch cruiserweight wrestling on a TV. It's artsy, it's interesting, but I just don't never feel the connection to it. When I watch cruiserweight wrestling at a local show, however, I'm invested because I'm like, I'm seeing it in person. This is real. This is like, he just did a somersault flip. How did he do that drop kick? That's also the reactions I get when I watch a Dakota Orion match. I'm interested. I'm invested in what the next, logical step is. Because this territory has a lot of really good cruiserweight wrestlers. And heavyweights, and middleweights, and anything in between. Okay? That's what Western New York has done. They've diversified their roster in ways that makes it a roster that can survive if somebody gets signed from one of the bigger promotions, as well as basically says, we have variety, we have a very good, solid fundamentals, but we also have people who can play characters. Anyway, match, once again, another good, solid match. There was nothing wrong here. It's like, and then we have our blood feud of the year. At Bergman Brawl 2, Jet Rebel had finally had enough. Jet Rebel, a man who had to, for the last year, literally go for a minefield with the STW Tag Team Championships. His partner, Anthony Gaines, challenging people to match after match after match as fighting champions, going against deranged vegans, powerhouses, cultists, and all sorts of madness that you will find at the local wrestling show. They have competed in mattress matches, no disqualification matches, qualification matches, and in this fatal four-way match for the STW Tag Team Championships, with them on the line once again, he snapped. Gaines had missed a show at the fairgrounds. Rebel had got to team with Bushwhacker Luke. That old sheep herder's vengeance once again came festering into Rebel's mind. He became a sheep herder. The sheep herders, by the way, for those of you who aren't aware, are the bushwhackers, but the much more dangerous version. They were the kings of hardcore wrestling in the 70s and early 80s. They were one of the most infamously dangerous teams in New Zealand and Australia, kayfabe of course. They were known for their legendary bloody brawls, in which they would go around the arena and brawl with their opponents. If a match didn't end with both opponents covered in blood, then it wasn't a true sheep herder's experience. The Bushwhackers is the softer PGG version of that gimmick. But Rebel got influenced by the sheep herder side and decided he had had enough of his partner, the internet sensation, the guy who literally got pounced into oblivion by Ace Romero. None of a kind, Anthony Gaines. A wrestler who, very similar to Valor and Skyros, is more than he looks. This guy looks, as you would think, a cruiserweight wrestler. He's much more than that. He's a solid technical wrestler with fantastic fundamentals who can play a wide variety of match types and match strengths, as other promoters are beginning to find out as they're booking him in other areas. This is a guy that can work with your top tier indie talent and make them look good and make himself look good. The match against Ace Romero was my 2018 match of the year, clearly. And it wasn't because of the pounce. The pounce was just the nice cherry on top of a match that delivered in every single facet. A match where basically the big guy who thinks that he's a cruiserweight literally was the underdog, David, facing against the psychotic Goliath that was willing to do anything to retain his ESW Interstate Championship. That's the kind of depth of character that Gaines can provide you. And in this particular instance, he was confused. He was shocked. Why would Rebel betray him? Why would Rebel want to move away from being a homewrecker? Because he's already doing a lot of homewrecking anyway, so why betray him now? But Rebel had enough. He had had enough of the fact that he had been dragged through matches after matches, surviving against insurmountable odds and devious teams. And he had had enough. The glory the Gaines had gained through that match, as well as being the viral star, being showcased on the local and national news outlets for that spot. And it caused something inside of him to snap. He wanted to be the star. And after that main event where he beat on Cassidy and Cloudy, and where he won, he got to be a star. He got to be a star without Gaines. And wittingly, Bushwhacker Luke causes the breakup of this team. He doesn't realize that putting Rebel in that situation will inflate his head to the size of a small balloon, and basically he will fake of the delusions of grandeur that he is the star. He is the star. He is bigger than Gaines, and he wants that prize. So we have ourselves a grudge match. Or at least the first part of a grudge match. Oh, they're going to take their time with this one. You see, Jet Rebel has a similar compatriot. After Gaines attempted to set some reason into Rebel, I know that this seems extremely strange for Anthony Gaines, of all people, to be the guy who is the literal voice of reason of going like, hey, look, guy, we defended these championships for a year. You are literally basically become a brother to me. And I want to reunite with the Homewreckers. Instead, Rebel spits at him. He is bitter. He is angry. And anger has clouded his judgment. Fame and glory has clouded his judgment. Jet Rebel has basically become Anthony Gaines. If Gaines was a villain. So instead, Gaines attempts to administer some well-deserved medicine with repeated moonsaults to the face of Rebel. 3 of them, in fact. Also, I should note that Gaines was working with an injured arm in this match. He took it easy to an extent, but he still did the important bits of moving the feud along forward for his general health, because Gaines also had a serious knee injury last year, which forced him to vacate the Interstate title, but he's back and doing wrestling after his knee healed. So, yes, after attempting to knock some sense, quite literally and figuratively, into Rebel, Gaines attempts once again to gain victory in this grudge match. Unfortunately for Gaines, a certain individual decided to show up. Remember that friend I was talking about a little earlier? Well, another guy who's been kind of bitter about the fact that he lost the match against Dakota Orion, well, he wants revenge on Gaines. Sebastian Braun has been convinced by Jet Rebel to aid him in his conquest of destroying Gaines. Oh boy. And after giving Gaines a chiropractor's treatment by putting him in a torture rack and trying to stretch out his spine like a Stretch Armstrong doll, he then puts Jet Rebel on top of Gaines for the 1-2-3. Rebel has won the first part of this grudge match. And we've got a battle royale coming up where Rebel is going to be a participant. Oh, this is going to be kind of fun, isn't it? This was a match that was very heavily story driven for a good reason. They needed to set up the template as to why this feud was existing. Rebel's bitterness against Gaines for his recent success and fame, along with being corrupted by the influences of the sheepherders, set this match into motion. He now has his own Butch to go with Rebel's Luke. The sheepherders have basically been, to an extent, reborn. Braun and Rebel are ready to cause chaos and destruction in STW. And I'm really interested to see what kind of stories these two can tell, because these two are really good storytellers that I think are kind of underrated. Braun has a sensible foundation. He's a solid technical wrestler with good power wrestling skills, and he's starting to get into character study of darker characters. The fine balance between finding a character that is dark but also family appropriate to an extent, while also being able to delve into the Shakespearean community theater that many wrestlers like to partake in. Because, as I've said beforehand, bear wrestling exists basically because of the fact that there have been people that were rejected by the community theater industry because they were either too big or not ugly enough. Yes, that is a thing in community theater and in theater in general. Jet Rebel gets to showcase his artistic skills. Same with Gaines. All three of them get to showcase artistic skills in this particular feud to show that they're not just, in Rebel and Gaines' cases, to show that they're not just flippy wrestlers, that they are three-dimensional wrestlers. And this is a territory that can really elevate that for them. So, after that match, what was next? Well, a singles match between Vince Fowler and Big Time Bill Collier. Invincible versus Big Time. And remember the Nazi Mafia from earlier? Well, they didn't like the fact that they were getting beaten up by Bill Collier, so they decided, under the guidance of their watchful master Super Beast, to try and destroy Valor and Collier during their match. So that match ended in a disqualification, and Collier retained the STW Heavyweight Championship. The match itself was solid, showcasing a lot of broad power moves, but it was a match that was a good half match. But then there was the tag match. I wasn't expecting two good matches for the Nazi Mafia, but instead, I did. I mean, seriously, these two seriously impressed. Valor was the face in peril for the entirety of most of this match. He got to face off against the deadly might of the Nazi Mafia, who once again showcased themselves as big, bruising, a big, bruising, destructive force that's like a bulldozer running into a house. A tiny cottage getting run over by the might of these two. I mean, and it's like they're looking at each other and they're like, we're getting a reaction. They're booing us. The children are screaming for our blood. It's a wonderful experience for a wrestler when your stuff works and when you get a reaction and it's like, oh wow, this is actually happening. So Valor tags Collier in. Collier basically powers up, does the traditional tag team powering up sequence. And the Nazi Mafia overestimate the abilities of Collier and Valor. And this was a fantastic match. But it wasn't all smiles for Collier. Remember Jarrell Kenneth from earlier? Well, he found a goal in mind. Kenneth, every night and Gage have appeared to have separated from their master Brandon Thurston for the time being from the patron saints of professional wrestling. Kenneth has found a new goal, and that new goal is the STW Heavyweight Championship. He's no longer getting it for Thurston, he's getting it for himself. He attacks Collier post-match, beats him up, and raises the STW Heavyweight Championship in the air, and proclaims that he is going to be the one that is going to dethrone Big Time. Valor was the fantastic face in peril in this match. Super Beast once again did fantastic interference. Really getting the blood boiling for the crowd against the Nazi Mafia, who, as I've said before, this is their first time here. It wasn't exactly something that they were expecting. They've worked a lot of smaller shows. They're used to a smarky reaction. They're not used to blood-curdling rage after squishing Gavin Glass like a bug and trying to take on their hero, Bill Collier. And their other hero, Vince Fowler. Again, there's multiple storylines here. Fowler feeling upset about possibly being the second fiddle to Bill Collier. The Nazi Mafia trying to rain a parade of destruction, possibly wanting to go after the STW Tag Team Championships because Vinnie Moon is having a hard time controlling a killer shark. And Terrell Kenneth wants the STW Heavyweight Championship. Oh, and we've also got a battle royale at the next show. That should add another wrinkle into this, as well as the fact that Collier has a match against Nick Merrick, who won a #1 contendership match at the Bergman Brawl show. So Bill Collier has now set himself up in a situation where he has a ton of opponents that want that shiny thing that he has and want to destroy him to prove that they are the best wrestler. It's a simple story, but simple stories often work. Same thing can be said for complex stories. It just depends on who's writing the script and who wants to flip the script and go in a different direction. What you have now is you have your heavyweight storyline for the year, and you have a ton of options going forward in how you want to proceed with the STW Heavyweight Championship. Do you keep it on Collier? Do you switch it over to the Blue Chipper Narek so he has to survive an onslaught of destruction? Does Rob Sweet get a championship rematch? Possibly at the next show, due to Super Beast's antics. What factor does Terrell Kenneth have? What does Vince Fowler do? It all sets everybody up in a positive direction as to what their characters and storylines are going to be proceeding for the next several shows. I'm really excited for Goldrush, can't you tell? But we still have a main event to go. The second part of the Frankie Fevers feud. He takes on the Divine Alliance in a tag team match with the Patriot. This was a Rocky Free-like main event, not just because of the fact that they were playing Rocky theme music during the entrance, and Frankie runs into the crowd and basically runs into the stands and sets himself up. He's pumping himself up to try and take on the challenge of the Divine Alliance, the dastardly Divine Alliance, Johnny Puma, the Caesar, the vile manager John Kennedy. What diabolical tricks did they have up their sleeve this time? Well, they had plenty. It was a solid comedy match combined with the seriousness of a blood feud. Fevers wanted to go after Johnny Puma, the one member of the team that he had not beaten to a pulp. But Caesar and Kennedy kept getting in his way, and that's in that regards to said beating into a pulp. This was a match that really reset the tempo of the Fevers Alliance feud. A feud that has stumbled a little bit because of things outside of their control. The Patriot, this was the surprise. The Patriot was the groundwork for this match. The guy was immune to chops, somebody Walter probably should fear at this point, as well as the fact that he anchored this match. He provided stability. He calmed people down. He said, look, guys, let's just have ourselves a fantastic main event. As well as the fact that he could wrestle with Johnny Puma. Puma is a traditional wrestler. He's a guy that is very much into old style 1970s, 1980s style grappling. He's a guy that can work miracles with comedy wrestlers. He can work with guys like technical wrestlers like Brandon Thurston. In fact, Thurston was the guy who retired him in ESW back in 2012. But this was a match that told a bunch of stories. First, it showcased the end of the involvement for John Kennedy, as post-match he got promptly punched by Frankie Fevers. And as a result of his actions of interference, John Kennedy has been banned from ringside for the last part of this feud. Frankie Fevers is fighting Johnny Puma in a singles match. No holds barred. Basically a DQ match. It plays to the strengths of both wrestlers. Frankie Fevers can be a high-flying wrestler, but he can also be a fantastic brawler. And brawler is kind of something that they don't really have right now in the territory. they've got a lot of good, solid brawlers, but a lot of them are longtime veterans. You have another brawler who can also be a high flyer and technical wrestler in Fevers? Okay, that expands your options. Johnny Puma versus Frankie Fevers at the Northwest Ice Arena in Jamestown. May 11th. I'm interested to see where this goes. But the Patriot provided a fantastic anchor. Fevers was solid. And just getting the rust off, because he hadn't been in the territory in a while. And he got to be able to showcase his skills. The Divine Alliance, once again, dastardly and evil. Again, this was a match that had, like, as I've talked about in this particular instance, this is not me gushing. This is me just legitimately being surprised of going, you guys went 9 for 9 on matches. I mean, obviously, there's also that element that wrestlers and everybody around wanted to prove something here. We didn't get booked for WrestleMania weekend? We didn't get booked on the 35 or so indie wrestling shows that were running around New York, New Jersey that weekend? Well, we're going to prove you wrong. And sometimes the essence of proving you're wrong without being overly egotistical about it is a good motivation factor of showcasing, yes, I'm a good wrestler. I can be a great wrestler for you if you use me right. And this show was one of the best shows I've seen from SDW in a long line of good to great shows. It shocked me. I was like, I get to see this on WrestleMania weekend? Well, that makes my decision not to watch any of the other wrestling shows that much easier. I mean, I'm going to definitely continue to watch WWE pay-per-views because, again, I wasn't able to watch those before. But it was a fantastic performance by the performers involved. It was a great showcase, a great spring showcase for everybody there. And you have this a good positive feeling that, yes, we're building something, we're working towards something, we're doing something constructive and productive in our scene. And this year 2019 has been kind of hard because you have all these different promotions who literally scooping anybody and everybody up to fill their roster that they need to fill because they're losing guys to WWE. And we'll talk about this later in the next edition of one of the next editions of Wacky World of Wrestling, as when I talk about the rest of the general indies. But this is a situation where if you're a wrestler, there's a lot of opportunities available. And in all honesty, it's a really good time to be a professional wrestler. And even as somebody I speak as a guy who is an outsider, who is a person who is not somebody who's inside the curtain of any wrestling promotion. I should make that plain as day. I'm not a person who's inside like a wrestling promotion or anything like that. I'm a person who's outside the curtain, who has studied up on professional wrestling since 2009, who has very different opinions on how and what and who and where and why of wrestling works or doesn't work. I have opinions that are very contractually different, but not contrarian different to others out there in the pro wrestling industry. And to see this show and to see the effort and the work that these wrestlers and people and staff and everybody's been putting into this is like, wow. Trying to do something constructive and productive in an area that has been just known for rust and crumbling buildings. That's a good thing to do. Reflections like this, it's in the video, a spring reflection of wrestling, really does showcase that wrestling can be helped in a wide variety of ways, and it doesn't have to be grandiose speeches or, claims or bellowing out, oh, we're going to do this. Well, are you? Well, if you're going to do this, well, why didn't you do it already? It was a fantastic time post-show. Thanked the wrestlers for the matches and went off home a little bit earlier than usual, so I didn't get to say hi to some people, but Gonna definitely do that at Goldrush. And because my mother accidentally pulled her hip at the when she was sitting down the ring stairs, and I was still recovering from my bout of influenza. I was not 100% healthy at that particular time, but I was 6 days removed from being well from that influenza bout. So we went home, made dinner, chicken tenders. Yeah, but overall, it was a fun, fantastic experience. And tomorrow, I get to go to Goat Rush. Gold Rush Battle Royale, no holds barred match. Bill Collier versus Nick Merrick for the STW Heavyweight Championship. A Jamestown mattress match where Ryan Cassidy is this year's poor unfortunate victim of the mattress. The undefeated mattress. Supplied by the Jamestown Mattress Company, of course. But, folks, this has been a spring reflection of wrestling in Falconer. It's a little bit of a shorter show than usual, but these SDW review shows tend to usually be. But this was one of the best shows of the year that I've seen thus far. I'm really interested to see what Goldrush provides. And it's once again a return to the ice arena. So we get to see some ice capades. Will Rockwell be able to conquer a creature that he accidentally summoned from ice? Will the SDW Heavyweight Champion retain his title? What is Terrell Kenneth going to do on this show? All those questions and more are going to be very interesting to see play out. And for those of you who have been waiting a very long time for this, I do apologize once again for the lateness of this particular review. Again, it couldn't be helped. Bout of influenza, decided to focus on my health. As I've always said, focusing on your health should be more important than doing a radio broadcast to an extent. I kind of burned myself out a little bit more back in 2017, 2018. Due to other circumstances that were beyond my control, of course, and the stress of it all. But this has been episode 58 of Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling, a spring reflection of wrestling in Falconer. I hope you have a good day or night, folks, wherever you are, and hope to see you again for the next edition of Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling, which is going to be a broadcast about, well, we're going to take a little bit of a return back to the Panic Race to Mordor and the independent wrestling scene in general. Because somebody's going double or nothing. And it's time to take a look at what's been happening since January, since the All Elite Wrestling thing started. But until then, this has been a spring reflection of wrestling in Falconer, episode 58 of Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling. Have a good day and night, folks. We'll see you next time. Bye!